Yeah, I'm here.
Okay.
I just started the recording, so you guys are good to go.
Okay.
All right, welcome to the work session of April 27, 2021. We're working on trying to get the budget finalized. So let's start by, I'll read the determination. In accordance with Utah Code 52-4-2074 of the Utah Open Public Meeting Act, I have determined that conducting an electronic meeting of the Centerville City Council with an anchor location presents a substantial risk to the health and safety of those who may be present at the anchor location. This determination is based on the facts and circumstances surrounding the COVID-19 pandemic. Thank you. Okay, so tonight, as y'all know, in maybe 3 other sessions, we heard from department heads regarding their budgets. Tonight we're going to hear a lot from Jake, but it looks like Jake, do we have Bruce on that was going to talk as well too about his department?
No, he did. If you don't remember, he did it, I think 4 times ago.
He did.
Yeah.
That's why it's great to have you, Bruce. But I remembered him reporting. So, but
Yeah.
I thought maybe he was coming back with an amendment or something.
Well, I let them all know that some of the stuff we're talking about tonight is kind of the budget overall, and so
Okay,
the president to see.
so you let the department heads know that, so that says they may be listening in. Then is what you're saying.
Yeah.
And they're welcome to put their pictures up. So I didn't mean to scare you away, Bruce, but so so then yeah, we've had all the department heads. So Jake, you're going to go over the rest of the budget with us. So I will turn that over to you and Brant at this time then.
Okay, well, I'm going to start by sharing my screen here, and let me know if I need to zoom in or not. How's that look? You see those numbers?
I could see them. I guess maybe you could make it a little bigger for some people, but I'm okay.
How's that? Is that a little better?
Yeah, that's better. Thank you.
Okay. Okay, I just want to go over revenues real quick. I just want to kind of build a framework for the rest of the discussion this evening to kind of give the council and the public that are watching what we're working with. So I'm going to start with revenue. And I'll start at the top here with the taxes. You see here in property taxes, what we're proposing at this point is just the regular 1% development related increase in property taxes that we usually get. There's no property tax increase put into this budget at this time, just an FYI. And as you move down here, we're assuming about a 5% increase, as well as some help with ARPA, of the American Rescue Plan Act, some money there. So we're assuming we're going to get about that much money in sales tax. As you go down, you'll see the franchise taxes. I've actually reduced them a little bit. Just with the trends that we've seen, some of them are really steady. They're not really changing a whole lot. So there's just a slight increase in tax revenue, and that is just that. It's mainly the sales tax and a little bit of increase in property tax. The other things to note, when you go through all the rest of these licenses and permits, slight reduction because we were expecting some issues still with COVID and such. Those might pick up. Building, the usual plumbing, mechanical, electrical type of permits. But in this next one here, the Intergovernmental Revenue, of course, big hit because we don't have the COVID funds, but this is where we will put the ARPA funds. So you'll probably see that jump back up again when we've determined how much we can use and how we're going to use it. And oh, by the way, what we've been told, and I'm sure you guys have heard from the league, we'll get the official guidance on May 10th about the time that the state receives the funds from the federal government. So we'll know more in a couple of weeks what we can do with those funds, and we'll make some further changes on here before we have the final budget. Charges for services, not much here. There's just the increases you'll see here is the admin service fees that we charge, the enterprise fees for some of the employees and the operations that are associated with that. And court, this is one where we bumped it back up to what it was historically, assuming that the ARPA funds are going to fill in that gap. So that's where you'll see some additional. Same with this. This is our interest, bank and investment interest, and you'll see this throughout the budget. we're bringing those back up to historical levels because we did lose money because the Fed cut the rates due to COVID. And we're assuming that's another place that we can plug some of that money. So you see some increase there as well compared to last year, but not compared to the years prior. It should be pretty similar. And if you look at the contributions and transfers right here, we have the RAP tax transfer for the Whitaker to cover the building and any capital improvements that they do there. And you'll see that a corresponding transfer, actually it's not a transfer, expense in their budget for that RAP tax. This also, if you look here, we have the clean air grant for the truck that we talked about, I don't know, 2 months ago, about purchasing that for the streets department. The rest of it's pretty usual. So with that, we're actually seeing a little bit, it looks like a reduction going from 11.8 to 10.6, but keep in mind 1.5 million of that is COVID funds. So there actually is about a $200,000 to $300,000 increase in revenue from this last year, without ARPA. Okay, so with that, Jennifer, if you could pull up for me the personnel document that we have attached to Novus.
Jake, can I ask a question there?
Yeah, sure.
I see that you're listing the museum garden fees as revenue.
Yeah.
Can you help me understand that?
This is where when they pay for a plot for the garden, this is where that money is going, is into here. It's an offsetting revenue with the museum programs and building. Same with the RAP tax. That's an offsetting cost.
Okay, so is that money, I don't know, earmarked? Is that the word for the museum programs?
Indirectly, kind of the same way that we take care of like the subdivision and zoning subdivision building inspection fees. They help to cover the costs that we pay for Sunrise and also some of our staff's time. So in that way, they are connected.
Okay, so is that money available for the use of the museum for the programs that they run, or is that?
Yeah, and in general fund, it works a little bit differently. If the city council has appropriated this amount of money on the expenditure side, unless we say otherwise, they're allowed to spend it. And really, even if that revenue doesn't come in, because it's general fund that is paying for their programs at this point. This is kind of that contribution. We have to put it someplace into the general fund. But I work with Lisa to make sure that those levels are the same. It's kind of the same thing with baseball. When baseball, they have their fees, even though they budgeted 50,000 and they're only bringing 35. I'm talking with Matt and Bruce about, oh, hey, you only have 35. And so they make sure they don't spend over that 35. It's the same type of thing that I do with Lisa with the Whitaker programs. Kind of keep
okay, so I
in.
guess I'm still not clear on. The museum is working on putting together enough money to do a pole barn, and either there has to be a way for them to earn money, or they have to request that from the general fund. So,
and we could talk more here later on towards the end of my discussion. We're going to talk about capital improvements, and that would be considered a city capital improvement. And we're working on putting a fund together for that, and that's probably where it'd be more appropriate for it to come out of, is out of that. It's not something.
Plus, when we talked about that, we talked about the importance of making sure we have a master plan in place. So
right.
that good, yeah. So.
Okay.
Right.
I'll bring it up again later then. Thanks.
Okay. All right. Jennifer, do you have the personnel stuff?
Yeah, I'm gonna have to shut off your screen.
Oh yeah, sorry about that. I'm gonna get rid of mine. So now I want to talk about some things overall. And we'll start with personnel here. This is good news. First, I'll talk about some of the things that we're proposing as staff. You see here, there's a proposed 1.8% market adjustment. And so that's that cost of living adjustment. It's based on the West Urban. It's from December to December. So December 19th to December 20th, kind of like we've done in the years prior. So at this point, that index says it's 1.8%. And I've broken it down by what it would cost by fund. So there's the general fund, the water fund, and the drainage fund. So that's the impact to those funds. A 2% merit pay to be given as a lump sum to the department heads to be distributed to their employees based on performance. And then there's the the final stage of the compensation study. So 3 out of 3. This is what it would cost to finish that off. The increases for that. Now here's the good news: medical and dental insurance, no increase, 0%. So no request for additional funds for that. Premiums are going to stay exactly the same, exactly same program, deductibles, everything. So no changes, and that's very rare. Life insurance is actually going to go down. We went out to bid for that, found a better rate with New York Life. So that's who we're going to be switching to from Lincoln. And they did give us the better rates and actually slightly better benefit that comes with it. So total cost you'll see there for an increase in personnel is in benefits and salary is 175,000 for the general fund overall, and close to 9,000 for the water fund and about 1,800 for the drainage fund. And if you
I have a question. So was it last year or the year before where we tried to get people to switch over to the higher deductible? We offered them money if they did that. What's happened with that?
Well, we still do offer the 1,500 for family, 1,000 for double, and 500 for single coverage if they are on the HSA program. Because we do have the 3. We have the Select Value, Select Health Value, Select Health Med Plus, and then we have the Select Health Med Plus. That's the high deductible with the HSA. So there is still that incentive to switch over to receive that 1,500, 1,000, or 500, depending on what they do. We have about 11 employees that are on that right now. And, we keep all the plans depending on their situations, what works best for them.
Okay.
That makes sense. Okay. Yeah. And that was a couple years that we started that, a couple years ago. So this will be the 3rd year that we're doing that. Okay. If you'll, Jennifer, if you go to the next page. So this is the, Jennifer. There you go. So this is the Centerville position job value pay schedule that we approve each year. It's the compensation schedule, and nothing's changed on it from when we had it approved back in, I want to say October. So the only thing that's changed on here, it does reflect the 1.8% increase in the market adjustment. So all of those wages ranges have gone up 1.8%. But the job values are all the same, the positions, the titles, and everything. So those are the same. So that's kind of an FYI. That's what we have there. Okay. All right. Jennifer, I'm going to go ahead and start sharing all the other budgets that I have. So if you'll let me take over the screen. Thank you. But before I go on, did we have any questions on that?
Yeah, on the merit increase, you said it's 2% distributed to department heads. Our assumption is that the department heads are going to use all of that, distributed at 2% per employee, or have we ever had a situation where we have had money come back on that hasn't been distributed?
There is some money that isn't distributed. Some of it's saved because they have the option. They can give them an annual increase, or they could give them a bonus at some point biannually, or in the middle of the year, a quarter, something like that. But yeah, there is some money that doesn't get used. Okay. And good news on the medical and dental. I mean, the reason behind that was because we got such a large increase last year. They want to retain us. They didn't want to bother with the whole going out to bid and do a new proposal. And honestly, I think they scored on us with that big, huge increase. So the 0%, they wanted to keep us. So hopefully we'll see a very small increase next year as well. We'll see how that goes. Okay. Oh, and there will be one change with that compensation schedule. We had a drainage supervisor before, but we went to a drainage operator, and we're putting it back to the drainage supervisor and that value range in there. So you will see that. I don't think it's reflected in this one that's right here. I'll double check that, but you might see that change. And that's mainly because our drainage operator does have budget authority and some added responsibilities. So it's more the position that it was before. Okay, so now I'll go back to the budgets here. All right, everybody can see that? All right. Okay, I'm going to start off with the, and I'll go real quickly through these only, any changes, any increases. The only thing that's different here is you will have a $750 uniform line item here. That's so that we can get you guys shirts or hats or whatever for when you go to these conferences.
Can you zoom in, Jacob, please?
Oh yeah, that is pretty small, isn't it?
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks, Brent.
I'm on a very large screen, so it's, I gotta sit back a little bit. All right, so this is the one thing that we'll get going for you guys. And then there's just the usual increases in the league, what they charge per year. We went over court. Okay, and admin. So in red. So here we're proposing a uniform as well. Same thing, shirts for the admin department. The admin department consists of the recorder, the city manager, the administrative services director, and this is new. If you look up here, we're moving Lisa, our IT position, into this budget.
We zoom in again, please, Jacob.
Yeah, I'm sorry. All of these I try to see the whole thing on screen. So there you go. So yeah, so you'll see an increase here because we have moved the IT position. And these increases are really related to moving that IT person out of the police budget into this administrative budget. And yeah, see, IT employee, we also have 3 hotspots that we use for the city as a whole outside of police in case they have to work from home or go to a conference and we want them to be on a secured line. We use these. In fact, I'm on one right now. Additional training, again, for the IT employee.
Can we go back to the hotspots for just a second?
Yes.
Working for a large employer that's had quite a few of those, we're actually getting rid of them because of the ubiquity of Wi-Fi services or cell services, or either directly provided by the employer through a cell phone program, or people who hotspot off their own Wi-Fi. How often are we using these, and does it really make sense to continue that in this modern era where coverage is basically everywhere?
Well, during this COVID, where people have been working from home, it's what we've been using for those who do not have the service at home. They've been using it because we found it's better.
I'll interrupt if that's okay. Yeah, we did have 2 employees, Councilmember McEwen, that actually did not have internet at home. And some organizations will, and I don't know if the state of Utah is, but we're asking employees to use their internet for business use. And so there are companies out there, particularly the private sector, that compensate employees for that use. We aren't necessarily doing that because we don't anticipate continuing to be working from home. We only have a few people that occasionally work from home, but that will even be becoming less and less if we no longer ask employees to quarantine after a trip. So we do have a few, and we will be evaluating if we need as many as we do now. But for my phone, I actually have the tethering option on my phone, which is only $5, and it gives me the same connectivity as a hotspot, which is $40 a month. And so we do have a number of employees who are on the city cell phone plan. It would be cheaper for us to give them tethering capability than to give them hotspots. Is that kind of what you're also thinking?
If they actually do need tethering, the state, by the way, doesn't pick up the ISP charges for anyone. Mm-hmm. So if you work from home, you were paying for your own ISP. There was no, and we had people who said, well, I don't have an ISP. They said, well, you're on vacation until you get one, or go sit in the library parking lot or whatever you need to do. They weren't covering that. So
that's kind of tough. We will evaluate the number of hotspots that we need. So yes, that's something that will be evaluated as we slowly bring everybody back and not working from home.
Right.
There's just no need. We did add, I believe, 3 hotspots for COVID. And I do believe we charged the CARES Act funding for that during that time.
That's I've heard. I'm just going to smile and say I've heard we charged the CARES Act, but that's still my pocket eventually. So
Sure, but that's why we'll also eliminate it, and then we will no longer have that cost.
I think for the purposes for which we used it was okay. I just don't think it's one we should look to continuing going forward. Even if you're traveling remote, then you need to plan around that if you need to be in connectivity.
Okay, well, great, thank you. Yeah, and also, Jake, if I can also share the IT steering committee, our discussion that we've had over this past 6 months regarding our IT services with the possible need of a network administrator or some other IT services. We'll be hearing a demo, participating in a demo with TechServe, who actually does IT services to our neighboring cities. So there might be an amendment to the professional services line there, depending on how that demo goes. But I think that could be a benefit to the city to help us on the network side, as we've discussed in the past, of really evaluating our network and how we're set up. Are we antiquated or are we doing okay? But we do need an assessment of our current situation. I don't know, Councilmember McEwen, if you are aware of TechServe or have any thoughts on that, but we can discuss that later.
Yeah, we can discuss that later. Ambivalent. I mean, they're out there. There's a number of providers who do what they do. So if they're coming by recommendation, I don't really have an issue. Their pricing is fair.
They are. Thank you.
There were at least 2 down at the conference, I think.
TechServe and Executech are probably the top 2 that you see in local government that I've seen. There are a couple others out there, but they tend to be more prevalent. I guess we do have some experience with Executech in the past. That's a separate conversation for another day, though.
Yeah, I don't know if we have. Yeah, okay. Okay. So back to this tuition increase. That's our policy allows up to $2,000 in a reimbursement for tuition. And so 5,000 was kind of a strange number, just made that 6,000. So it was good for up to 3 employees. This is mostly used by the police department, and their numbers have grown. So we're kind of expanding it by 1 individual. So now you can do up to 3 employees.
And are we tying that back to any kind of policy statement? If you get reimbursement, you have to be at the city for X amount of time?
Yeah, there's an agreement that's made between the department head as well as the city manager.
There is an agreement. In the past, I've changed the way we do this. It used to become really a first come, first serve, and I didn't really like that. And so we're actually prioritizing. We did have an employee pursuing a master's, and I kind of felt, well, that money should be spent better for bachelors. So again, prioritizing, the need and the department. So there is some subjectivity in that, but I do meet with a number of employees, including the department head, to discuss the prioritization of those employees applying. So they apply early in the year for consideration later. So it's not just we wait for the request to come in and then we pay it. I want to prioritize it earlier in the school year.
Okay, we're anticipating a slight increase in printing, not only the cost of the actual newsletters themselves, but this is also where we charge for utility inserts. So that's where you see an increase there in the printing, as well as postage. If you guys aren't aware, postage rates went up. We're anticipating they will go up again too in about 6 months from when this budget is passed or when our fiscal year begins. So this is anticipating it. And then down here, capital equipment. This is our computer replacement plan. We're putting 8,000 in there. Don't know if we're going to need to use this. Hopefully not, because with the COVID funds, we've been able to, get quite a few new computers, but that's in there just in case. This will also cover things like servers, switches, firewall, anything like that. So
part of that plan is we just purchased 50 Surface Pros that we want to build a little nest egg. So in 3 to 4 years, we're going to need to buy a whole bunch more all at the same time. So we're not hitting the budget one year really hard. We need to start putting money aside into a separate program to buy those if they all crash at once, or 2 years or a year. Surface Pros, I don't know what their lifespans are, but we do need to be thoughtful of future years.
Brent just got cut off. Okay. And then the next one here is our network equipment and licensing. This includes our current contract that we have with Spearhead. And
what is Spearhead again?
Spearhead is monitoring our network in simple terms. and they have been for 4 months now. And they will continue 6 months into this next year, and we can choose at that point to continue if we want to. What I've heard from Lisa so far is that she loves it. They're doing a great job, and they advise her on quite a few things. They help us keep up to speed.
That came out of the situation that we had all of the
last fall.
Confidential meetings about, right?
Yep, that cybersecurity issue, yes. So, and also we always go over budget, if you'll notice, in these prior years. And so this is just kind of getting it up to where it's at realistically. And the other thing too is everybody now has a 365 license. All of the employees do, so that's increased our costs a little bit. We didn't, not all of our public works had them. Now every employee does, so we can have better communication, and also so there is that opportunity to work from home if they need to. And that's pretty much it for the admin budget. Any questions before I move on to the next one? Okay, finance. The only changes here, postage again. Is the only thing. Let's see right here, banking services. We have more people paying online, and that's what we've been trying to push people to do. And of course, there's more merchant fees. So that's where that goes there. And we're anticipating this year we're going to be over budget on that, but we can make up with the other line items. And then we increased the liability deductible because our deductible is $10,000, not $5,000. So if we ever have to use it, we have that money there. And we discovered that this last year with the same issue. All right, the other budgets that we need to go over, elections. Yeah, we had nothing last year. We have an election this year. And this is the estimate that we have from the county of what that will cost. And let's see, fire. I'll go to the fire real quick. And Brant, correct me if I'm wrong on this one, but this is pretty close to what the final is going to be, what our assessment's going to be for this year, right?
That's correct. So their latest proposal budget discussions had 3 scenarios of how to use their funds, and all 3 scenarios had the tentative budget of that amount. So we anticipate that would be the amount for next year.
Okay.
Do we have any ability to affect that?
We are now. So again, that budget before was around the 13, 14, 1.4, $1.3 million range. And us city managers, we're part of an administrative committee. It's the 5 city managers of the 5 cities. We oversee the budget and work with them on the budget. And then it gets passed on from our recommendation to approve to the mayor and the commissioners. The mayors of the 5 cities then approve that. That's our input. And Mayor, I don't know if you want to add any to that, but that's how we're involved.
No, you guys, as the administrative committee, have been working with them on that, and so it hasn't come before us yet. So if you're confident that, like you said, those three scenarios, that's what it is, and I think we're safe in putting that as that's our budget.
Well, that's still a 30% increase.
It is.
Yeah.
Yeah, what Brad told me about the other increase, I think all the other mayors felt the same way too.
I don't think that's a 30% increase. It's a 10% increase.
From here to here, yeah.
That's really
how is 919
to $1 million?
To $1.2 million, not 30%.
No, it's a million, just $1,017,000, not $1.2 million, just $1,017,000.
Okay.
Oh, I'm looking at the original.
Yeah, this has been changed since that time, since that one that was sent out a while ago.
Councilmember Rance, would you like another copy?
No, that's fine.
Okay. Yeah, this Friday I will have the official tentative budget available, and hopefully we won't have to change too much in that. Now this next This next budget is the transfers, the non-departmental transfers, and this does have an impact on the general fund. Here, let me zoom in. Okay. And it's mainly to do with this Utopia transfer. You'll notice that this last year we were able to reduce from 256 to 141, and that's because we're starting to get that rebate from Utopia on our pledge payment. So that drastically reduced it, 128,000, something like that. This next year, and let me just skip over to it. There's not much down here. We have the transfer to the recreation fund, as well as our personnel contingency. That helps us. That's where the 2% for department heads goes for Brant to use rather than into the individual departments. And that's also what we use for payouts for retirements and when people quit. So that helps cover that liability that we have there. But let me skip over to the RDA. So, or actually to the Utopia. I'll just show you the Utopia fund here. So my proposal is that we increase the amount of the tax increment. The RDA, we're paying off the sales tax bond next week. And so we won't have that $500,000 payment anymore in the RDA to pay for that bond. That frees up that much money just in that parish gateway. Now, if you remember, the RDA owes the general fund for Freedom Hills Park, and we're allowed to use that increment money to pay that back. So my proposal is we increase the amount of that increment that gets transferred to pay for this pledge payment, offset by the Utopia rebate that you see there of 123,000, rather than using the general fund, transferring general fund into this. From, I mean, this year, and this is a policy question. It's just how we want to move forward. What do we want to do with that RDA increment? Just saying for this next year, this is something that we can do, and that helps to free up about $140,000 of general fund money that we can be used elsewhere within the fund. So that's where you see it on this side, the transfer, that it's been reduced to 0. When normally in the past we've had the larger amounts, 141, 256, 304. So that's come down.
I think that one warrants some policy discussion because that does tie up the RDA funds of, of course, the same amount. And I'm not sure, are we done with all improvements in the RDA areas or other incremental RDA spends that we want to do?
Right. And there are a lot of things that we can do with that RDA increment money, but one of the things that we can do is pay for the parks that were planned or put together before 2003. So that is one of the options. So this is one of the things that can be done. So yeah, policy question.
I'm not
like to go ahead, Councilman Rand. Sorry.
I'm not following that math you did just a second ago, Jake. Could you back up and do that again? I mean, you've got 500,000, you got 135. You went back and forth, and I missed it.
Okay, so let me just go to the RDA budget. Then I'll make it easier for you to see, and everybody at home as well. So you'll see here. Let's see. Let's find it right. You guys see the bond payment in here?
Size, please.
Yeah, right here. Here it is, and here. So we have
zoom in, Jacob.
Oh, okay, sorry. Yeah, we'll zoom in. Okay, on the expenditure side, we have this 593,000. This will be the last payment that we have to make this year in the RDA for the theater. So obviously next year we have 0. So that frees up that $593,163. But we're still collecting the tax increment up here under the parish lane. In fact, this is how much we're anticipating getting this next year. It'll probably be a little bit more than that, this $1.2 million. So now this 1.2 million will help cover some of, like, Dayton West. That's actually the only payment that we have in the parish gateway that needs to be covered with this 1.2 million.
Dayton West was the amount that we owe out of to reimburse them for development items, right?
Yes, exactly. That's for the Chick-fil-A property, their second building, and the carport or the parking garage.
And
So
how much is that?
Well, there's still quite a bit left on that, but it's based on what increment they generate, and this is how much they generate. It's 128,500. So it can't go above what they generate in property tax increment. So we still owe them about 900,000. So that will still go on for. Oh wait, no, correction. I'm sorry. Next year's the last year we pay them on this as well. So actually, this will go to a zero the next year because the Parish Gateway. It expires next year, and that's the expiration of the agreement that we have with Dayton West. And we could talk about that more, during our RDA meeting.
It expires, but I thought that we opted to extend it.
Yes, we opted to extend the Parish Gateway area, but not the agreement. It sunsets next year, and we do need to look at it, and we'll need to talk to Lisa about that if that is the case. Because there is still some that's owed to Dayton West. They have an up to amount like we've done with the others. But the agreement itself says that it actually expires in 2000. The last payment would be for tax year 2021.
Part of the extension of the haircut for 7 years is to address items that we had identified with the RDA funds. And this is again, back to Councilor McEwen and Jacob and I discussed this today, of having essentially a strategy meeting with council to determine how to spend these funds for the rest of these 7 years. The participation agreements may end, and that's our belief at this time, but we'll need to research it. But we still have funds that we could apply to parks, refunding the general fund, and those type of items. And so what's the best use of these RDA funds for the next 7 years? Because again, now we can address infrastructure and other items that we'd identified when we started the RDA.
And I just want to make a plug here, not to have the discussion, but just to plant a seed that we've got that overpass reconstruction that will be coming up. And I'm sure we'll want to make a significant contribution to beautifying that project, as it's our main entrance. And what better fund to use than the Parish Gateway, because it's the gateway. So,
right.
Yeah.
So these funds would be eligible for that as well.
Yes, and we do have the 2 intersection improvements that are coming up here shortly, the 400 West as well as the Marketplace Drive. And we did say we were going to use RDA funds for our match for those intersections. So that is coming up as well. So there's a few things that are programmed. And we did use some of this money from the Parish Gateway to purchase the property next to City Hall, the $350,000. So we have been using that in some ways, but yeah, that'll be a discussion. Traditionally, what we've been doing, I know Steve Thacker's the one that started this up. We've been paying back for the Freedom Hills to the general fund for the use of that. And then we've been using that money that comes from this increment to help pay for that Utopia pledge. I think that's been set up for a long time, before me anyways. And so what I'm proposing here is, the continuation of what we have been doing, just beefing it up a little bit this year so that we have a little more general fund to use for capital equipment. But if we don't want to do that, that's fine. We'll just have to figure out where we get the money from other places.
Should we be doing this discussion of the plan and the budgeting of that money before we finish this budget?
Yeah, we're planning to have an RDA meeting next Tuesday before the regular meeting at 5:30, where we do have a public hearing to approve the tentative budget. That'd be a great time to discuss. I don't know, unless you have a different idea, Brant.
Well, that might be a late as we're preparing this budget, and to go a little bit deeper in, we have another Stephanie Ivy joining the city council meeting. This part of what we're proposing in this budget is, what's not in this budget is the property tax increase. As staff, we are considering in lieu of, Brian Hatch is calling me back. In lieu of having a property tax increase, of using these funds or American Rescue Plan funds as well in addressing our capital equipment. Jacob will go into that a little bit more, that majority of the capital equipment requests have been funded with this ability to use these RDA funds differently. We can have a strategy session on the use of the RDA funds for this next year, but I would propose we actually have this strategy discussion in the August-September timeframe for the years to come. But being so late in the year for a property tax increase, we're really late to try and squeeze one through, and that's not our recommendation at this time. We are receiving the American Rescue Plan dollars, which in our mind is in lieu of a property tax, so alleviates some of that pressure on our residents this year, but next year it should be considered.
Yeah, and let me just shift the discussion a little bit here. I'll stop sharing because I've talked about all the general fund, and maybe Jennifer, can you pull up the other attachment, the capital list, the capital equipment and project request list? Yeah, perfect. Okay, so you've all seen this before. So we have on the left column the department request for the equipment, the capital equipment, and then we have the tentative funded. Now this has changed every time that we've had a meeting because either we found revenue or we lost revenue, but this is where we're at right now. This is without a property tax increase proposal. And so if you kind of just scan it real quick, you look down, there's most of the things are funded. There's a few things that aren't. If you could scroll down just a little bit, Jennifer. We added one thing in police. Stop right there. Go up just a little bit. We talked about this last time. There's a staffing analysis. That's a strange number because that's my, right now, that's my balancing the budget number. I'll change that, but that should be pretty close to what it would cost. Brant's going to do a little bit more homework on what the actual cost is on that though. So that one's been added in the staffing analysis for the police department. And then if you scroll down, you can see.
And what does that staffing analysis give us?
I don't know, Brad, do you want to explain a little bit about how that one works?
Because when we left off the last discussion, we were talking about an officer addition. That's not enough for an officer.
I'm sorry, repeat the question, Councilmember Ince.
I'm just saying, what's in this staffing analysis? When we finished the last meeting with Paul, I think it was George and I were pretty positive on doing at least one officer. They're looking for two.
Right.
Is that what this is covering an officer? What are we talking about?
This is not covering a new officer for next budget year. No. I think where we had left it in the last meeting was if we're talking about any additional officers prior to doing that with a potential property tax increase, is having the Center for Public Safety Management come in and do an analysis of the police department. I met with the chief today and we had a conversation about that, and he supports the idea. In fact, we're going to be getting a proposal back from the Center for Public Safety Management tomorrow on what that cost would be. So as of right now, the hope is that the need is to have that happen first, a thorough analysis with a recommendation to us. That's where I had thought we had left it.
Oh, I agree, but if we don't at least think about it in the budget, we're another year out.
We are another year out, but I'll share that the Ferguson group, what I did, I attended Love, Listen, Lead conference down at League last week with Cameron Deal. And I do see a potential need. And I had this conversation with the chief today with a community relations officer or a PIO of some sort to kind of bridge that gap between the police department and our community. Chief thought that could be very helpful. And there is funding from the federal government. It's called the COPS grant, Community Oriented Policing grant, that's available that could help provide some of the funding for this a new officer. But they're not boots on the ground or patrol, but they could alleviate some of the responsibilities of our patrol officers as well as our detectives. So there is that potential conversation happening.
And is that person a sworn officer or is it an administrative?
Sworn officer. In fact, in most jurisdictions, that officer is a sergeant. And it's a kind of a rotating, in cities I've been with, it's a rotating sergeant, just as chief runs his department here. The sergeants rotate through.
And would the DARE responsibilities be covered by that officer? So to free the current officer that does that up?
That would be up to the chief on how he wants to operate that, but not necessarily. It would be entirely up to the chief how he would determine how he wants to use their services. But what I'm saying is we could get financial assistance from the federal government for the next 3 years. It's a tapered off effect. They give you more money in the first year, less second year, less in the third year, and then cut off in the fourth year. So it gives us an opportunity to build our budget up for that officer.
Well, we had that earlier discussion today, and better communication on all fronts is probably an improvement. Or not probably, is an improvement.
Absolutely. And this is, again, that love, listen, lead, the data, which will be released here in the next week or two. It was incredible. The survey that was conducted with every, with the differing groups throughout the state was telling on the perceptions, the difference between boomers and millennials and how they perceived police departments and police officers versus the different ethnicities within the state, and this is specific to Utah and the issues we're dealing with. So it was really eye-opening, and they had a sample size of 1,200 participants or so, and it really gave some interesting thoughts on our police work. And really what I came out of that was more training for our police officers, which I've asked him to look at increasing the training for our officers in this budget, as well as looking at a community relations type officer, help with that communication, Councilmember Ince, and again, just developing that relationship, not someone that goes out there writing tickets, but somebody out there building the community building.
I think I understand what you're saying.
Yeah. So that's a focus, and the grant is very helpful in the first year. And if we are awarded the grant, great. We can use some American Rescue Plan dollars for purchasing the equipment for this officer. It would be a pretty minimal contribution for the operational side.
Grant would cover the whole first year's salary, Brad?
Not 75% is how it's been in the past. I need to see the NOFA for this year to see what it does. And it hasn't been released yet.
And
Notice of funding opportunity.
That's great. And I agree with the approach also, but just out of curiosity, as it tapers down and then we're paying for that officer ourselves, is there still an obligation, and are we still having to report about the duties that officer is
You're talking about the federal agency?
Right.
No. So the way they used to do the program, which was far more lucrative, shall I say, is they would actually pay for the salary and benefits for the first 3 years, 100%. And a jurisdiction would agree to keep that officer on for the following 2 years. That was problematic for a lot of jurisdictions, and they didn't fulfill their agreement. So essentially, they changed the way that it's implemented. And so after the 3 years, we no longer have an obligation even to keep the officer on. I wouldn't say we do that, but a federal agency is out after year 3.
Well, if it's a system and it seems to work well, I think we would be foolish not to continue it.
Right.
Although, yeah. So I guess the question, it seems like we've got kind of a migrating conversation. We were talking about the increment and all of that apportionment, and then we get to this staffing thing, and then we get onto something else. And I don't know if it's me not following, but I'm not getting final answers.
Okay, so back to your original question, Councilmember Ince, in terms of the one officer, yes, we're potentially out a year for that officer, but the argument from our previous meeting that I'll share again is another officer, due to the costs that are involved, I believe there would need to be a property tax increase to pay for that new officer. So now if we're talking about it going through the truth and taxation, then that's a different conversation, but that's not being proposed here. But if that's the sentiment of the council to do a truth and taxation to hire another officer, that's definitely something we can entertain.
And one of the points that I brought up last time is tied to the same information that you got at the conference, Brant, right? The reason that community-oriented police officer is so important is because of the shifting way that cities are viewing officers. And so I think that it's absolutely the prudent thing to do to have the analysis done, so that if we do need to do a tax increase for specifically an officer, we have data to back that up from an outside agency.
Does that answer the question, Councilmember Rentz, a little bit more directly?
So I
No,
guess
I'm
my
sorry, it
follow-up
doesn't.
My
Okay.
follow-up question, Brant, is if we are looking at doing the analysis by an outside party, then timing wise, does that even fit into this year's truth in taxation process, or would we be looking at that being
If you-
next year?
It would take some time. The truth in taxation, I believe the deadline, and Jacob, maybe, or Lisa, I think September is the last time we can actually do a truth in taxation hearing.
It's actually August. So-
August, yeah, I was thinking maybe August when I said September. August would be the last month we could have a truth in taxation for this fiscal year, or we're waiting till next year. Now, again, part of the truth in taxation we're discussing potentially in the future with a property tax increase is the cemetery, which will be on the ballot this year. And so, again, I don't know if there's a better way of doing a truth in taxation next year with cemetery and potential police officer, but there are competing priorities that we have a lot going on that might need. What we're proposing is a budget retreat. There's a lot of interest, and you've heard a lot of those this past month and a half of these competing needs and interests of a city. Chief, absolutely, there's a lot of demands in the chief's police department, and they're all justified. Public Works in desperate need of an employee or two, as well as some very expensive equipment. So we really do need to sit down, and that's where I'm talking about a 5-year budget. And that's basically budget strategy for the city, and how do we support these departments, and how do we tell Chief, you're not getting this police vehicle this year, but we're going to get it next year, and we have it budgeted, and it's good to go. Once we get the finance director on board, that's the direction that I'd like to take the city, is planning 5 years in advance.
Councilman Nance, will you restate your question or two directly, and so Brandon or Jake can answer it directly? What you're confused on still?
Okay, the latest one is we've got this staffing analysis, which is, I don't know if it's 63 or 83. I'm having a hard time reading it.
63.
So what is that? Are we talking this study is $63,000?
That's correct. And I don't know how much it's going to be. I'm going to find out tomorrow what the estimate will be to have the Center for Public Safety Management come in and do an analysis. I have really no idea. It could be 10,000, could be 100,000. I honestly have no idea until I see the proposal.
Okay, that answers that. That, I don't know. That seems awful steep. George, do you have a feel for that?
Yeah.
Again, this will definitely be an agreement brought before you to vote.
No, I understand.
Yeah.
I understand that. The problem is that we're trying to finish the budget, and so you've got to make some decisions.
Yeah.
I agree. It makes sense. I don't know that I see $60,000 worth of benefit to that. I'm not sure I see that. Then the other question that I had is we've got $590,000. It's not going to be spent on the theater anymore. We've got a property tax increment of $1.2 million that has gone there in the past substantially. I'm trying to understand that net number and where all of those pieces are ending up.
Okay, well, that's a separate budget. That's an RDA budget. So that's not related to the city budget, except for that transfer from the RDA budget to the general fund into the city's budget. That's what I'm trying to explain there. So we are able to do that transfer from the RDA budget to the city budget because of a repayment.
Sure, I understand.
Okay.
I understand that. So we're doing that transfer, and what are we doing with the money?
It's paying for the Utopia pledge payment.
It's paying for the Utopia pledge payment, but also what that frees up is the funding in the general fund to purchase all that equipment you've heard in our previous meetings from other department heads that you're seeing on this list on the screen right now. So these items, many of these items weren't funded because we had $300,000 tied up in the Utopia, or plus or minus, Jacob, maybe 250,000. was tied up in the Utopia payment. But if we use the RDA funds to make the $250,000 Utopia payment, it frees up $250,000 in the general fund to purchase the equipment that's on this list. So those items where you're asking, how long has that been on the list? And it's been on there 12 years.
Sure.
And it's going to be delayed another year. Well, now that's going to be funded because of our use of the funds in the RDA to pay the Utopia this year. We're not proposing that be used year after year. We do want, it's a policy decision in the future, but what it does eliminate is the need for a potential property tax increase as well. Because again, we're now into late April and having those conversations with the residents, I don't think would go very well.
Well, to supplement what Bill has already said, I think the analysis is important. I'm just, in my own mind, just weighing the math and saying, do we really believe that they're going to come back and say we need no augmentation to our police force? I don't think that's going to happen. So I'm wondering if it isn't prudent to at least have it penciled in, pending what they tell us. I mean, I see the chief is here. I mean, if there's any thoughts you have on that, Paul, I mean, do you think they will come in and say we're good, or?
Well, that's not even necessarily. I think the staffing analysis is a misnomer, and that needs to be relabeled. It's essentially a performance measurement where they come in and they look at the process, right? They, where are we spending our time? Are we spending too much time on reports? They'll go through and actually provide other assistance besides just, do you need more people? It's more than that. They're doing a full audit of the police department and giving ideas and suggestions on how to be more efficient or use our staff time more wisely. And it might come back and saying, look, if you were a little bit more efficient in this area and make these tweaks, maybe you don't need an officer, or here's some staffing ideas on patrol, just a different perspective on department operations. So if I had to guess, the number's probably going to be more around the $30,000 range. Don't know exactly what it's going to be. I haven't seen this before. I haven't used them in the past, but I've attended multiple sessions from them. And I think they have a good outlook on how department operations work. And these are former police chiefs that are part of this.
Well,
The other thing that I'll say, go ahead, George.
I was just saying thanks, because that adds more definition to what that is, besides staff analysis.
Right.
And the other thing that I'll say, and of course, no offense to Chief, but 6 years under the direction of Steve Thacker, I heard nothing but repetitively, you can always have the expectations that there will be an ask for more officers and more firefighters, right? And so it's not that we don't want more or that we couldn't even say that we need more, but we need to just always be careful, because that's an ongoing cost and it can really balloon out of proportion to the city's budget and maybe even the city's needs. But I do love the idea of a full analysis as well, just to get that outside perspective and maybe some refinement.
Yeah, I agree with you, Tammy, on all points. I think you do have to be very careful with it. The whole concept of law enforcement and managing what your officer load is relative to your crime rate. And I don't want to oversimplify the math, but you're talking about how much crime are you willing to tolerate in your city, of what types, and what type are you willing to resolve, and what window of opportunity. Now, I'm not saying go to a police state where you've got an officer on every corner, but it certainly does allow us to resolve crime a little bit faster if we have, in my opinion, more resources available. But that's academic for tonight, because we're talking about the analysis, which I think needs to be done. But I do have concerns about where we sit on the overall safety ladder when you look at the open statistics.
And I'll just reiterate, thanks, Councilmember McEwen, great point, and thanks, Councilmember Fillmore. So the reason why the one officer is not included, now we did free up some general fund dollars by using RDA to assist with the Utopia payment, but what we're asking to use those funds are on one-time payments. An officer is an ongoing expense, and that's where I go back to the thought that if we're going to have another ongoing expense as expensive as a police officer is, that a property tax increase should be part of that consideration. If that's going to be, and I would dare say, if you're going to do it, let's go for the 2 officers and not just 1 officer. But that's what I'm saying is it's an ongoing cost. Right now, we're asking RDA funds to be used for a one-time until we have a strategy session to discuss the use of the RDA funds for the future. But I wouldn't propose using the RDA funds this year for an ongoing expense. I shouldn't alleviate using RDA funds to alleviate the general fund expense for ongoing. Does that make sense? What I just said, maybe not a little.
Paul brought his picture on and then got back off. It looked like he was getting ready to say something, but he didn't. Do you have any thoughts, Paul?
Well, yeah, I've been listening to the discussion and turn the video on there just so that you knew that I was here. So as far as the analysis goes, I mean, it never hurts to have people come in that have expertise and can help us improve our systems and the way we do business. I mean, part of me, I recognize that it's going to, just the fact that they're coming in and doing the analysis is going to create a lot of work for us. And so we're already pretty busy, but at the same time, it's valuable. And I recognize the fact that these are taxpayer dollars and they are finite. And the need is, everyone's got needs. The streets need things. There's a lot of different needs going on within the city. And I want to be cognizant of that and respectful to that. I think it also goes to the quality of service, what is expected from residents within the city for police services. And we hold ourselves to a pretty high standard, I believe, of service. We respond as quickly as possible, and generally our response time is pretty quick. I think we have a very good record of solving crime, but we are very, very busy, and we have had to take many of our cases that we've had to prioritize cases and triage them and basically do fire sales and get rid of cases that are going to take more time than really we feel like they're worth. So there are a lot of cases that are not being fully investigated. The main push or the main impetus behind my request or my bringing this to the attention of the council is basically grassroots. My sergeants coming to me, my patrol sergeants specifically, coming to me and telling me, hey, Chief, we need some help here. And so we've obviously taken a look at the numbers. And now last year during COVID, when COVID hit, everything kind of shut down. Our calls went way down. Everybody across the state, all the calls and everything just went way down. The crime went way down, but that's not the case anymore. And we're back to where we were and we're climbing. So, and I don't anticipate that changing at all. It's, business is brisk now. We're coming into summer. So I'm just listening to my people that are telling me we need more folks. And feel that's my responsibility to relay that to the council. Now, can we continue and function at our current level and provide a good service? Yeah, I think we can. We are stressing our officers out quite a bit. The training requirements are just, they're just increasing and increasing. We've got officers in training this week. Well, we've always got officers in training, just about. I mean, there isn't, I don't know if there's a week that goes by that we don't have one of our officers attending a 2, 3, 4, 5 day class. So, and then you take that into consideration along with giving them vacation time and whatnot. It does get to be challenging to cover our shifts.
I guess part of the reason that I feel pretty strongly about it is in the environment and the world that we are in, and the pressure that the police are under, ignoring a request without them seeing that we at least attempted to do something is not in our best interest.
I'll agree with you.
So even if we don't act on it for a while, even if we say second half of the year, I would like to see us attempt to respond. Now, we put it in for the second half of the year, we go through this study, come up with some other ideas, come up with some other things, and they say, gee, we don't need it, then we don't have to do it. Now, the other part of it, the tax increment, or the property tax, I'm sorry, not tax increment, the property tax increase. We decided when we did the big increase 4 years ago, 3 years ago, 4 years ago, that we should not let ourselves get back in that situation again. We were going to do it last year, and then we didn't do it because of COVID. I don't want to increase my taxes any more than anybody else, but I think we ought to at least be thinking about it. So even though we're late, I think we ought to at least have the conversation and go through it. And if we pull it off the table just before the end, we pull it off the table. But I think we ought to be thinking about it.
We're definitely thinking about it, Councilman Rance. We definitely, from administrative standpoint, I have to listen to all the department heads, right? And I'm not saying you're not. I'm just saying they're definitely competing interest here in how we're moving forward, and the argument for another officer is not unfounded. It's a good request. And this is entirely what's before you is a presentation and a recommendation from administration. And what you're discussing is a policy change in the budget. And that's entirely in your purview. And you are welcome to make those changes and those suggestions. But being a policy decision, the question would be, is what do we remove from the budget to move that in? Which department sacrifices a piece of equipment or an ongoing expense to fund that officer without new revenue? And that would be your policy decision as well, is what do we take away to fund the officer position? Now, there is the opportunity, if we're talking about the second half, we can always open up the budget January 1st. We have the study happen. We hear what we need and improvements that need to be made, which could include more equipment or more software, more computers, whatever it might be. That could also be a part of that. We can open up the budget, look at where we are, and hire that officer if that's a recommendation in the second half of the year. There's no need to make that decision now. We can make budget amendments halfway through and make that change.
But I think what Bill was saying is that it's in our best interest to make sure that our officers that we currently have feel our complete support.
And I think they have.
That doesn't always happen by saying, oh, well, after we do the review, we may talk about something in midway.
Well, the past 3 years, we've definitely put forward and funded the salaries and improved the salaries, particularly in the supervisory level. We've made huge increases, and we do support our police department. And that was a huge cost to make that happen. And so, again, this is an ongoing expense. It's not saying, no, you can't have it, or no, we don't believe in you, or no, we don't support you. The question is, how do you fund it? And if there's a policy decision on how we fund that, I fully support you in council and saying, yes, we want that to happen. But what do we take away is the question. Fully support it. No problems. If you said we're taking away this to fund another police officer or two, administration wise, we support it. We're not opposed to it. What we tried to present before you now is a balanced budget with advice and discussions with our department heads, and that's what's before you. But if your priorities are different, that's entirely up to you. We're not fighting that in any way. We're just trying to make sure you're informed on an ongoing expense and how do we fund that ongoing expense of, it's 100, 110, 115,000 a year for a police officer, plus the equipment that needs to be replaced on an ongoing basis. That's it. That's all we're saying, is just being aware of that change, so you're aware of the impact for the future, not just
Sure. No,
immediate need.
I do hear what you're saying.
I do think we also need to remember that when we asked the chief about, would the officers feel better supported with a raise or with another officer, he said every one of them come back and said they'd rather have a little more money and work a little harder for it or do whatever they have to do as opposed to getting a police officer. So I think we are supporting them by trying to give them their raises, by bringing them up as best we can. I mean, I'd love to have, I talked to the chief today about having more officers on at night because we've got such a high crime. Somebody's telling me every day that somebody's car was broken into. So I do support them, but I'm not so sure right now I do think we maybe need to look and see with an analysis what we can do. And I do think we are supporting our police department. And I think they know that we support them and we love them. And like I said, they're not coming and saying we really want another police officer. They're saying we'd rather have a raise than another police officer.
So let me just interject, if I can. I would feel comfortable with kind of going the direction of doing the analysis, looking at the COPS grant as a possible source of obtaining another officer, and waiting to mid-year to see how we're doing budget-wise and get the results back from that analysis and address it at that time. That I would feel comfortable with that.
So I appreciate that, Chief. We all feel that we want to support the police department, and they've asked for a couple of additional officers. He's made a nice offer there. We've asked Brent and Jake to sharpen their pencils, and they can't get this down any lower. I don't want to go through a truth and taxation meeting without you being serious about raising taxes, because I don't want to waste hours and hours of time to come back and say we're not going to raise taxes. I mean, if we're going to go through it, then we go through it and we be serious. And we also got to realize that the fire station, I think their ask was ridiculously high, but they're trying to meet a compensation study. We have a compensation study we're trying to meet, not only for our police department, but the whole city. I mean, ultimately it comes down to that if we're going to meet these requirements, we got to find money somewhere. And that means we have to be serious about it, or we have to cut back or do without. Now, the chief has made a nice offer. Can we make it work that way? Is the thing we have to decide. Or are we going to talk about trying to raise taxes?
I agree with you, Mayor. I think it's pretty hard to go in and try and ask right now to increase taxes. Yes, we've talked about it before, but last time we raised it 40%, we got just over $300,000. And last year we spent over $1 million of our COVID money. We brought our computers up to where we needed to. Everybody had a new computer. We did a lot with our COVID money. We redid our city hall, which was something else we needed done. Our general fund, I think now it's up $2 million. I just don't see where our sales taxes increased over what we ever even dreamed. I don't see where I can say to our residents, you know what? We got $300,000 worth of 40% income. Now we got $1 million last year and we still need more. I just don't see how this is the year to increase the taxes. I mean, you've got people that are struggling with COVID, that have been out of jobs. And I just don't see where, with the amount of money we've had from the COVID and all the good things we've been able to do with it, I'd have a really hard time supporting a tax increase this year.
I agree.
So the chief has thrown something out there. can we move forward with what Jake and Brian are saying and keeping in mind what the chief has said? As far as looking at it mid-year, chasing that grant right now and that type of thing, how does everybody feel about doing that?
I am willing to go that direction. I just think that we need to look closely, and so yes, I am willing to go that direction. I'm going to push back on Robin and Stephanie's statement. Even if the only thing we do with the truth and taxation hearing is maintain the percentage from last year, I think we ought to be doing it. I don't know what the rate is going to come down to this year, but our rate has come down. What's the rate come down from the last 2 years, Jake?
It's almost back to the rate it was when you did the property and tax increase years ago.
Mm-hmm. It's actually a little.
I think we're fooling ourselves. I think we're fooling our residents.
Yeah.
I know nobody likes it, but the price of things isn't going down.
I'll speak plainly, and maybe I'll get in trouble for this.
No, I'd prefer that you speak plainly. If I'm wrong, I'm wrong.
From an administrative standpoint, our job, we have a number of employees who love what they do and they're passionate about what they do. Our department heads are incredible. That from an administrative standpoint, we feel the property. Well, I'll speak for myself. We want to provide a high quality level of service to our residents and our businesses. And the only way to do that is with funding, and things are expensive to do. We'd love the public works to have the latest and greatest equipment and to be able to do their job efficiently and effectively. Police department, the same. Community development, we do let things go, such as a general plan. It hasn't been updated as quickly. They should be updated every 5 years, but now we're going on 10 years. There is one section of the general plan that's 1985. That's a little outdated. So we definitely would support, we're not against property tax increases. We do want to provide a high quality level of service, and we do have department heads that are somewhat discouraged to be able to provide that high quality level of service because we may not have the equipment or enough personnel. So sure, from an administrative standpoint, we support a property tax increase every year so we can do our job and be effective in what we do. But we get the balancing act and trying to be reasonable and do the best we can with what we have. So property tax is definitely by far the most stable revenue a city can have. Sales tax can go up and down. And in 2008, 2009, we saw that, right? And all of a sudden now we're tightening and removing or delaying. We're still trying to recover from that in some areas, right? We have equipment from 2005, 2006 we haven't replaced because that 3 or 4 year delay or that 3 or 4 year recession has just delayed any purchases. Right. So now we're dealing with that. So we're playing catch up, and we constantly feel like we're playing catch up. And I'll be honest, Centerville already runs lean. We are lean in personnel. We try to do our best in equipment. I think we do a really good job making sure we have equipment in certain areas, but other equipment is definitely outdated and old. As you've heard over the past month and a half, that a number of our pieces of equipment are just outdated, and we spend quite a bit of money repairing them. We appreciate Dave Stark and all he does to keep us going. But property tax increase, sure. From an administrative standpoint, we want to be good at what we do, but we get that it's a huge cost, and we recognize the challenges to the taxpayers. We can't place a burden on all of them, but they also, if they want a high quality level of service, they've got to pay for it. I'm sorry, that's just plainly spoken.
That's the t-shirt log line. If they want a high quality of service, they've got to pay for it. And so in support of what you're saying, Bill, I think that it really is not appropriate for us to purport that we have a high level of service yet never pass on any of the increases for that, because we've heard very clearly, well, if you do X, then you've got to drop Y out of your budget, and if we're believing that we're already running lean, X and Y are both requirements, they shouldn't be dropped. So that's where I'm not as opposed to the conversation on a truth and taxation hearing for the purposes that would yet to be lined out, whether that's a new officer or if that's helping us fund some capital equipment, whatever it is that's there. But I think the realities are here in Utah with the rising costs of homes and everything else that's going on around us. You look at incoming staff members, salaries are going to get more expensive if we're going to attract any talent. I feel really bad about asking somebody to work in my city who can't possibly ever afford to live in my city, because we're never going to be anywhere close to paying a wage that can do that. And all that has costs. So I think, not saying we need to just completely pivot and start spending every dime we can think of spending, but I think that the purse strings are probably on a chokehold. They need to loosen up a little bit to allow us to be a bit more flexible in providing the services.
Yeah, and when we talk about our land use issues, I hear a tone of, well, Centerville's kind of a really high quality place, right? And we want to keep it that way. And we don't, I hear a tone of, we don't want to increase our density because we want to stay this certain level of quality. And so then on the flip side of that, I think that our residents who do appreciate that quality of their neighborhoods, they also want to see that quality in the physical environment of the city that we're responsible for and the services that we provide. And then on top of that, when you put it in relation to our surrounding neighboring cities, our rate is still extremely reasonable. And then of course, all the same arguments of we're just keeping up with inflation so that we're not having to even decrease our already lean running of the city. But specifically to something that Robin mentioned, and that's the COVID money, I really think that we need to keep that money and conversation separate, because there were actual costs to COVID and there were actual needs that were created because of that situation. And so that funding was very specific in what it could go to. And so I don't think we can just say, well, we got a bunch of free money, and so we don't have these other needs that we've always had, which we have always had them. I've worked at City Hall for a really long time, and we've been an extraordinarily frugal city to our detriment in some situations, in some areas. So you guys already all know my feelings on that, but I just wanted to speak especially specifically to the idea of bringing in the COVID funds as an argument as to why not to do it this year. I disagree with that.
But the only thing I say is, a year ago when we were talking about it, they were saying to us, we need computers. Our computers are all outdated. We need a tax increase because we need to update them. Well, we did update them. Whether it had anything to do with COVID or not, yes, people were working from home, but we were able to do what we were saying needed to be done. We were saying that the City Hall needed to be updated. Well, we did that. So we have done a lot of the things that we were saying we needed to raise the taxes for. We have taken care of with the COVID money. I mean, those things needed to be done before there was COVID. I remember the talk last year about how bad our computers were, and so-and-so's laptop was this year's old, and so-and-so's laptop was that year old. And now everybody has a new one. I think with all of the money we've been given, I could not support a tax increase this year. And I appreciate with what the mayor's saying is, I don't want to go through the expense and put our staff through all of that work unless there's actually 3 that are willing to vote for it. And maybe there are.
The difficult thing we face is the benefits of a great economy. And that's kind of an oxymoron, I know, but we're one of just a handful of states that have a growing economy. And with that growth has increased our cost of living. And that cost of living is increased for each of us, and it's increased for each of our employees as well too. And I feel for the fixed income people within our city, the elderly people that might be on a fixed income, and others that are. But the reality of this is we are growing, and I think we're going to continue to grow. And we gotta face it again. If not this year, we have to face it next year, because that's just the environment we live in. We live in one of the 2 hottest states in the nation, and our cost of living is just jumping tremendously. And you all know that as well too. And so that passes on to our employees, and our costs to run the city as well too are increasing.
Well, and to your point there, Mayor, I think that given the right use of proceeds, I think the truth in taxation hearing would not only happen, but would probably be voted in, depending, or voted for an increase in taxes if the use of proceeds is correct. I think we should still proceed in having a truth in taxation hearing.
While I know that there are people who will object, I don't think there's a choice. I don't think there's a realistic choice. We can just decide not to, but what we are doing is we are creating a bigger problem in the future.
We are creating a debt in the city, whether that's infrastructure, staff, that we are simply moving forward something that we will have to do anyway. And we've rendered Brent speechless because he wasn't prepared for us to push that hard on it, I think.
Again, this is a policy, right? I hate to say from an administrative standpoint, any support to ensure that we maintain or increase our level of service, we're not going to say no to. This is definitely a policy decision. But absolutely, if that's the direction majority council wants to go, then sure, that's a process we need to start right away. Definitely not anything that we could, I guess we could prepare a truth in taxation in a short period of time, but we'll need to schedule a separate conversation agenda item on this to start going that direction, if that's the direction council wants to go.
I think we've made Brent speechless because Brent and I had conversations that we were moving ahead with the budget this year with the revenues that we have. And to Brent and Jake's defense, they've put together a budget for us that doesn't include adding a couple of officers and some of these other costs that are coming up. And so if that's what you want to do, then the reality is we have to have some more funds. But that's I don't want to speak for you, Brad, but I think that's one reason why you're speechless, because they put together a budget with what we had presently, and that's what we were going with for this year.
I wouldn't say I'm necessarily speechless. I mean, I think the conversation is great, and I think everyone's hitting the points that I almost feel like you're making an argument for me, and it's great, because those are points that I would bring up and arguments that I would make of why it's needed. We are falling behind in becoming the city to have a 40% property tax increase every 4 years is to just maintain the rate is not really the best way of doing business. But again, you're the elected officials, we're staff. If that's the policy decision and direction you want to go, we will go and do. It's one of these items that I'll only say the idea is potentially 2 officers is the reasoning or the argument for the property tax increase. I would just, again, I shared this before, is just be careful that we make promises on property tax increases, because it almost happens in perpetuity that those funds can only be used for that item. And it really challenges us to ensure that those funds are being used to calculate every penny, so we're not fulfilling our promises we make when we make an argument for a property tax increase. Does that make sense?
I wouldn't tie it. You've taught us that. I wouldn't tie it to it. I agree, but we do need to explain the reasons.
Sure.
And the reason in my mind is to keep up with inflation. I mean, our rate is back where it was, Jake said, 4 years ago.
I will share another argument on a property tax.
Which for or against?
Well, I was just going to say, in the past, our policy, the decision policy has been to maintain a certain type of, how do I put this, housing throughout, a housing choice throughout Centerville City, right? And there is a cost to that. When you have one home, 2 or 3 homes per acre, and you have streets and infrastructure to support those 3 homes, that's great that we have single family homes, but there is a higher cost to that homeowner. And that is one of the downfalls of not having multifamily housing, is that the cost is borne more so on one family versus multiple families to pay for those costs. And that's definitely a housing choice here in Centerville. And that just needs to be understood as one of the consequences of having single family homes and trying to maintain a high level of service. The same mile road costs the same, whether it's 5 families on that mile or 40 families on that mile. So just something to think
I'm
about.
curious when you say that, property tax rates on the residential, and if I understand the way the system works, we cannot collect more on the properties that were there than we've collected on them in the past, unless we do a truth and taxation hearing.
That's right. It's revenue based.
If you look at the property tax rate on
But if you
a
change from a single,
$500,000 home, let me finish.
Right.
If you look at the property tax rate on a $500,000 home, and you look at the property tax rate on one of the complexes down by the theater,
Mhm.
where they're on a couple of acres, you've got 40 or 50 units. I mean, you've still got a valuation on the property, and isn't it subject to the same rate?
No. Okay, so being owner occupied, you receive a discount to live in your home, right? You pay 55% of the full amount, whereas a commercial pays 100%, right? I wish I had Corey on here. So I'm pulling up property tax right now. But if that $500,000 home converts to a multifamily, then it no longer has the same
55%.
no longer has the same qualification, so it shifts and the value is calculated differently, and that's called new growth that comes into play. So whenever you have build out, your tax levy will be X, but if you have new growth and new buildings, there is an increase in what that levy is, and that's where property tax increases does increase. It's not just one number all the time. New growth does increase, and maybe Lisa, if she's a little bit more aware of Davis County than I am, but new growth does add to that levy.
For me, it's a little bit easier to understand if you look at it from a higher level. You're looking at the entire jurisdiction itself, and that's what the county asks me for. Actually, is what's that revenue amount plus whatever the development is. And based on that, I mean, the values shift from one part of the city to another. And that's why you'll see a different amount that you pay in your property taxes because of that shifting. But overall in that jurisdiction, that a revenue amount is still being collected the same. It just gets calculated based on those values that are within the city. Does that make sense? So we collect, at the time we collect $1 million. And then you have so much property value, and that determines the rate. And then depending on what your value is, then against that rate, that's what you'll pay. But yeah, you can, and it happens all the time. The county will do an assessment on properties on the north end, and the values will shift from the south to the north. But then as they move their way south, it kind of shifts back. You'll see a decrease actually in the amount that you pay.
You haven't lived in Centerville long enough, Jake. I've been here 30 years. I've never seen a decrease.
I did. I was in the north end. I did see a decrease.
Okay, I've never seen a decrease.
I happened to move to another part, and I saw the increase on the other side.
So the apartments on the west side pay Centerville City they paid $21,000 in 2020 just to Centerville City. That's not their total bill. Again, I went through the scenario with a council member here, and they pay $300 a year. And so the apartments are on 5 acres. So let's assume 4 acres, 4 units per acre. That's $1,200 times 5. That's $6,000 versus $22,000. Now, again, this is how it's played. Multifamily, you have more people in one area. They're using the roads more and using our services more. And there's a cost associated with that.
Sure.
There's a cost with our police department that will tell you that
Careful.
you know,
Careful.
I know, but if you want to just look at facts, you
Yeah.
will find out that we will need a few more officers if that's the way we go. As a resident, not being on the council, I would come to you and say, your general fund is way up. You've got Utopia money that you've been having to pay that you're getting back. You're getting RDA money that's being paid back to your general fund. So everything you guys are saying makes sense to me as far as we need more money, but I can see where all of this money this year is coming back. We're getting money back that we're not having to pay out with the RDA. We're getting money back from our Utopia, which hopefully is even going to be higher than that. So as a resident, you can't convince me to say, if you want to keep your services high, well, we raise it 40%. We're only getting $300,000. Well, you're getting way more than that with where your general fund is, with your Utopia money that we're getting back, with the RDA money that's being paid back. As a resident, you couldn't convince me. I want the services too. And if things were as tight as they were 2 years ago, I would be considering, I really thought we would be doing a tax increase. But with the things that have happened and the money that's came available, you can't convince me that in order to keep the, if we want 2 more police officers, then yes, we're going to have to raise taxes. But I would prefer to sit back and see where your analysis comes in on that. And I don't know, you'd have a really hard time convincing me as a citizen when I looked, at the things that are, at the money that we're getting back, because everything you're saying is true. But what about, you're not saying anything about the fact of the money that we're not having to pay back on the RDA, and next year it's even better. And we're not saying anything about the Utopia bill that we're not paying as much for.
Mr. Mayor, can I propose, thanks, Councilor Meekum, that we have this as an agenda item next week. And so we have a motion on which direction to direct staff to either prepare or not prepare. I'd also direct Jacob. Now, I don't think that will change our tentative budget at this time.
Doesn't have to.
And until a decision is made, but make this an agenda item next week with a motion to give clear direction to staff. Because it seems divided. It's definitely not unanimous. So we just want to make sure that's on record and clear direction to staff as we proceed.
Well, it sounds between myself and at least a couple other council members that we have a direction to move that way and have that discussion.
Okay. Jennifer, will you please add that to the agenda?
Yep.
Thank you.
So Mayor, if it's okay with you, and thank you, council, for this discussion. It's been very helpful. I just have a couple more items. And
Yes, go ahead.
Can I get you to scroll through the capital acquisition list?
Yeah, go ahead, Jennifer. Can you pull that up?
And Jacob, can you make note if you can recall the items that were added back in with the use of the RDA funds with Utopia that allowed us to fund these items?
Yeah.
So start at the top of Justice Court.
Yeah, start at the top. So the ones that got added back in because of the RDA funds, the copier for the Justice Court was one of those. The attorney special projects was another one there. If you go down to police, one vehicle went back in there. We were funding the rest before that time, as well as all of the launchers that we were only doing partially before. I think we only had 4, maybe 4 or 5 before. The bullet resistant windshields, that's added back in, as well as and this staffing analysis, whatever you want to call it, that was added back in there. Okay, if you scroll down, let's see, there is the next one that was the upgrade chop lift for the 1 ton. If you remember that discussion, Mike was talking about how that was needed in order to lift the equipment. It's been asked for many years, 8 years. So that was added back in. Let's see, the other ones, let's see, keep scrolling down there. Most of those were funded there. Okay, stop there. Go back up just a little bit. Yeah, I want to say the online building permit system for the community development, that was added back in. And then, yeah, Yeah, that's what it would fund. were
Was the
those.
general plan update added back in, or did we have, was that?
Was
We had-
already
we had a-
put in there.
we
But
had-
just so you're aware, we'll be pursuing grant funds to see if we can, through Wasatch Front and other organizations to help pay for that.
And that's partially funded in the RDA as well.
Yeah.
That plan.
Okay.
there. So those are the updates.
What about second page? What about second page?
Well, the second page is the other funds. It's water.
Oh, and there were none of those that weren't being funded. So,
Yeah,
okay.
because they have their own source of funding and they're fine. They're pretty healthy or whole.
Councilmember Rents, I'll bring this up because I know you really want to. And that is a sign in front of City Hall. It is a discussion that Jacob and I have had about including that back in this budget. But also I bring it up because I do want direction. Councilmember Rents, I know you've brought it up and I wouldn't mind having that conversation as well.
And in anticipating that or any of those similar type of requests, Jennifer, if I could share with my screen, I'll show you where I put the funds for that at this time.
Didn't you think we could pay for that with RDA, Brent?
Yes.
Okay. Go ahead. Sorry, Jake.
Yeah, no problem. Okay. Let me just show you what we've used in the past for council when you have things like this. Okay, right here. This has been increased, and this always has been there since the beginning, is this $40,000 in special contingency within the council and mayor's budget. So this is money that you can work with when you have some of those plans, some of those ideas, or other things that come up during the year. So that's the money to work with in the future. So you know that's there. It was 10,000 this last year. Didn't use a whole lot the year before because that was supposed to be, I think it was for lobby furniture and updating the lobby. So it wasn't used a whole lot, but it was
Still need
there.
to buy lobby furniture.
Yeah, still need it. So this 40,000, if you wanted to.
Didn't need to because we haven't had court.
That's why we haven't felt pressured to do so.
Yeah, nobody's complained. All right, so I'll go over the other two things I wanted to go over real quick. And one of them is a policy thing, and it can be very simple. It's RAP tax, just to show you the budget here. So anticipating an increase similar to sales tax, and this is one of those areas where we could probably use ARPA funds to plug any holes in the future. But the main question is here, it was established years ago that RAP tax 85% would go to the park fund, and that's the only source of revenue for the park fund. So so we're looking at close to 400,000 that will go in there, and that will cover our obligations, the lease payment that we have for Island View Park, as well as I think we have 2 more years left to pay on the community park expansion to the rec district. And then the other 5%, one part of it goes to the Whitaker, to the building for capital improvements, and that's where he saw that the revenue. So this is a transfer from here to the general fund under that other revenue. And then as well as the DCPA, the theater, to the Centerpoint Theater, we have another 5% to help them with their capital improvements. And then this is the to be determined portion, which we still have that for this year. That hasn't been designated for anything, so that sits in the fund balance. And then there's this amount that's the 5%. So I don't know if the council's still comfortable with this breakdown. We just move forward, have this discussion another time mid-year if we want to change it up. But at this point for the budget, I've assumed the same policy that we've had in the past.
What is the $390 for parks? Last year's actual was
It'll probably be around
381.
381. Yeah, it'll probably be around 381. I actually think it's going to be a little more than that. I haven't updated that number in a couple months, or I mean a couple weeks.
What is our estimate for our 12-month estimates right now at 448? Well, RAP tax, yeah,
Oh,
446.
yeah, the amount that we're collecting, yeah, right up here. Yeah, there's some interest in the actual RAP tax, yes. And these are broken down by that 85 and the 5, 5, and 5. So there's going to be more than we had budgeted going into those accounts for being transferred.
I don't know what others think. I would be, and we talked about having a new category to get some minor things at the parks, which would go a long ways to improve view. And I don't know what it takes to cover the needs that we need, but I'd almost think about an 83,444, and then that gives us, if I did my math right, another 5% for minor items at the parks. So, and maybe you just call that parks, I don't know. But
Yeah, well, I think that's what that TBD was kind of set aside for.
sure, well, yeah, okay, we can just leave it there, I guess.
Yeah. And that TBD, I know there's been requests made like from the baseball program or from the Whitaker for that 5%. Yeah. So is the council okay then at this point? See,
I think I would leave, I would vote to leave it. I'm not sure what others would say.
Agree.
Okay.
Although if we have some left over in that TBD from the current year, I think it might be beneficial to put it in with those additional small items in the parks.
I'd agree with that, yeah.
So we could transfer that 5% into the park fund and then use whatever's in there in the park fund. That way it's designated.
But not to be swallowed up in the park fund as a whole, but to be specifically for, you know,
Small items at
small
multiple.
items that are needed, you know, a swing or a whatever it happens to be.
And let me show you the park fund, just so we're clear on that. So I'm showing here the transfer in from the RAP tax, and it's 85% plus the interest that's earned. That's not included in that 85,555. So 100% of the interest goes into this account here. We do have the park impact fees, which are actually still paying back the RAP tax for the community park. So you can count that as revenue that can be used for anything within parks. And then the interest income that on the fund balance that's sitting in the park fund itself. So we're looking at close to 460,000. Now what's actually been budgeted.
How realistic is your $40,000 on impact fees? Is that?
We actually have collected more than that this last year. And anticipating some of the development that we're going to be receiving this next year, it may go over that 40,000. But that's a conservative number, that 40,000 for this next year. You see the 6-month actual for this last year was 57,384. I still need to go back and see where we're at now, but we're already over that 40,000 just for this last year.
Jake, do you know what it is for a single house?
20, I want to say 28, between $2,800–$2,900.
Yeah, and we've got a lot of, I mean, with the housing pressures, just a lot of infill. Wherever there's any piece of land, it's going to be going.
Right.
Well, if the DeVore property is developed, that's 238,000.
That's a lot of impact fees. Yes, and I or the finance director will advise you as we go through the year where we're at on that balance with that impact fee. That's part of the financial report, because we have a fund right here, or a line item that's called capital projects. This is nothing specific. This is where you could spend money for those swings or all those maintenance things that you need. And I'm showing that we're going to have close to 70,000 this next year. That's available, not including fund.
Is that basically a plug?
Yeah, that's the plug. That's to balance the park fund. See, we have the Zion lease payment, so that's been put in here, as well as the payment to the rec district. This is what's extra with that RAP tax transferring in, and the impact fees. So you have that 70,000 there. So it is available to take care of those types of things. And that's how we account for those miscellaneous small items. Or you can save it up and work on a larger project.
So Robin, the only flaw in your $238,000 is that it won't happen in a year.
Right.
It'll be spread over 3 or 4.
And it may even be longer than that with the cost of building and things like that. But we do have other, I mean, we
do have other, I mean, we have the.
I'm not saying we get that much. I'm just saying, even if we got only half of that, it's still more than double what he's.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right.
But then I look at all this and everything we talk about. Well, we have more than we think here. We have more than we think here. We're getting more than we think there. And then we're turning around and wanting to up taxes. It's just.
Yeah, but we can't use this money for those other things.
Now, this is RAP tax money.
Right, but RAP tax owes the city and is paying them back.
Now, park impact fees owe the city. So the park impact fees are actually paying back the RAP tax balance. We were using RAP tax when we could have been using park impact fees for the community community park expansion. So there's a deficit there. And so that's what it's doing, is the impact fees are paying back the RAP tax.
No, I think we understand that. She's saying this is further argument for why we don't need a property tax increase.
So, Jake, I have something I want to say before we leave tonight, but I don't want to go along with what Councilwoman Meekham's saying, but I don't want to divert back to that again right now. So I want you to continue ahead.
Okay. The next thing, just a few more, and I promise I'll be quick. Sanitation Fund. Sanitation Fund is looking healthy. Now, you remember that we had to do an increase in the rate because our dumping fees went up. So as a result, we are using fund balance each year because we're not quite collecting as much as we need to cover our costs. So this year we're showing a fund deficit of about 32,000. You see that here, this use of fund balance. Next year, anticipating about 18,000, and that's because only because spring cleanup, we've reduced that amount from what we've had traditionally. Now, this 20,000 does cover what we did this year. So if that's what we want to do next year, we have the funds for that, but we do have this deficit. Now, the current contract that we have with ACE, we're in the third year. We have 2 more budget years. We have $106,000 sitting in the fund balance for the sanitation fund. So there's a couple options here. We can continue to run this deficit and we'll be okay until the ACE contract expires. And then when we get the new contract, we're probably going to have to change our rates anyways. Or we can go through the process of changing the rate and bringing this use of fund balance to a 0. So that's a couple options. Again, another policy decision. I think we're fine for the next couple of years using this fund balance. We've built it up over the years. And to me, it makes sense to have that increase with the new contract in a couple of years.
I think I would agree with that.
Okay. Especially
I don't know about the other 4.
I know we're talking about a water rate increase, and I know that's hard on residents to take both. And we're talking about a possible property tax increase. Spread it out a little bit.
Who's groaning?
One of you has a race car in the background.
I'm sorry. I live next to a busy road. A lot of teenagers here. Okay. And then the last thing here is we have a new fund that we wanted to talk about, and we call this the Fund 47. There's a lot of zeros right here because we don't have anything transferred into this. But see if you can see the title. There it is. So this capital projects budget is where we would park funds that we want to be able to use throughout the year for larger projects. Related to this is a policy about fund balance, what percentage we want to be at. And generally cities, when you go over that percentage, you transfer that amount into this fund to be used for larger projects that come in the future. Looks like Brant unmuted. I think Brant has something to say.
Well, I was just I proposed this. A lot of cities have this. Now, we haven't had a fund like this in some time because our general fund reserves have been below 25%. But legally by state law, we can't have more than 25% in our general fund reserves. So what that means is it doesn't prevent cities from essentially creating an account to draw from for capital improvement projects to eliminate the potential need for debt. So anytime we approach 25%, if we actually have 26 or 27%, we actually get an audit finding for having too much in reserves. So what you do is you create a capital improvement project fund, and this is where you start storing those funds above the 25% that can be used to purchase park equipment or public safety building or city hall renovation. But this is the place where you actually start putting capital improvement projects. And I'd like to recommend that once we have the finance director on board, that we'll be using this fund more often. There really is two things we're dealing with as a city. We have an operating budget that is our ongoing costs every year. And that's pretty stagnant. And then you have your capital improvement projects budget. And I want to start treating those differently instead of just wrapping our capital improvement projects up in our operating budget, because they're really not operations. What we tend to do over time is Public Works may ask for an additional $5,000 in a line item for a very specific widget. But when we do next year's budget, we don't really remember, we may not remember that $5,000 widget. So we just carry over that same amount to next year, but we only end up needing $1,000. But they may spend all $5,000 since they have it all there. So it prevents us from getting, lost with the operating budget with capital improvement projects or one-time expenses. Keep those separate. And this is the first step to going in that direction of separating the two the two budget items. Any questions on that?
Brian,
I couldn't agree more.
I have a statement and a question. Statement is, thank you for putting into practice what I learned in theory in my governmental accounting classes. I always wondered why there was not a capital projects fund. And then my question would be, are we close to the 25%?
We are there, and we're in a unique situation now where we have received the COVID funds, and we're going to be with the ARPA funds, where that's commingled right now with our general fund. And it would appear when you calculate the operating, because of that amount, we're over that amount, because we had budgeted enough to cover all of our costs without COVID. But now we got these additional funds from COVID that, we need to put them someplace. I mean, we've used them. We've used quite a bit, but there's some that we need to park.
So from an administrative practice, my philosophy has always been to keep it around 20%. There's no need to push our luck by being near 25% to possibly have an audit finding. And the issue is you might get an influx of funds coming into the last of the year that you didn't anticipate, and you didn't transfer those funds out. So in practice, administratively, keep it around 20%. This council can develop a fund balance policy where you can dictate what that percentage is. It can be, again, the legal limits are 5% to 25%. It could be anywhere between there. Councils like to keep it at 15. They don't see a need to have 25%, which then frees up those funds to go into the Fund 47 in our case, and allows those funds to be used for one-time expenses on capital improvement projects.
Well, my understanding of both the prior COVID funds and this next round, if they aren't spent within a specific period of time, we give them back.
We have already allocated the funds by using, the funds are general fund money. We've already allocated, essentially spent the funds. We spent the funds in essentially supplanting public safety salaries, which allows us to put this funding in our reserve account that we have been desperately trying to build back up. So these funds have been spent and allocated. So there's the CARES Act funds have been spent in theory, according to the IRS federal guidelines. Now, the ARP funds, the American Rescue Plan dollars, at $1.9 million we'll receive in 2 tranches. What we'll be looking at over the next year with advice and counsel from all of you is we might be able to use those on items that we budget for right now. And we could potentially use that money and put it in a savings, or we could reallocate those funds to other priorities.
And we have 3 years to spend the ARPA.
And we have 3 years to spend those funds, 1.9 million.
And if we choose to spend those funds, and there are specific categories, if we choose to spend those funds on ongoing expenditures, or ongoing operations, then really to a degree, we fool ourselves.
Yeah, I wouldn't.
Because it creates a problem at the end of the 3-year period.
Correct.
Yes.
So again, yeah, the argument is one-time expenses for those funds. And May 10th, just so you're all aware, May 10th, the Treasury will be releasing their guidance on what those funds can be used for.
Okay.
Is there more, Jake?
No, that is all I have. So thank you, council and mayor, for the discussion tonight. Greatly appreciated.
So I want to throw out to you, Jake, and coming back to Councilwoman Meekham's side here. I'm not playing sides. I'm just trying to make sure we get all the evidence. Okay. So for the discussion next week, what I would like to see, especially as a financial guy, is these funds that she points out that we're going to be saving money on, i.e. UIA or Utopia, that we're not having to pay as much. The theater, we're going to be finishing our payments there, albeit that's in an RDA fund. COVID money, where that went to, that sort of thing. I kind of want to see the money that we're going to be saving, what in one column, and then what we're spending that money on. Because I think the point that she's trying to bring up is, if we're saving that money and we have extra funds, where's it going to? If it's not going somewhere already within the budget, then why do we need a tax increase? Is that kind of fair to say, Councilwoman Meekum? Is that what I'm hearing?
Yeah, I mean, and we're creating another fund because we have so much money. We need to get our money out of our general fund and start saving it. I don't see how, when people watch this and see what we're doing, oh, you've got to create a fund that you've never been able to have so that you can have a great savings, and you need to raise our taxes.
I will counter, Councilor Meekum. This again, our reserve was shockingly and scary low, right? And these funds are assisting with building up of that fund, but an ongoing year after year moving forward, we're not going to have funds besides this 1.9 million that we're receiving from the federal government. There will be no other funds coming in, and that's what we're trying to prepare for. Is not tomorrow, but 5 to 10 years from now. So
and people agree with that, but what we were telling people we needed to have a tax increase for last time was so that we could increase that. So we've been given, I'm not saying we can't have a tax increase next year, but I'm just saying we're getting 1.9 million. A tax increase is going to be probably 300,000 at the most. I just don't see it, but that's me.
And Councilwoman Meekum, from day one when I came into office, first with Steve Thacker, now with Brant Hansen, and Brant took the words out of my mouth. I came in and there wasn't much of a reserve fund at all. And I've always said I want to get that reserve fund up to the maximum because we can't live from paycheck to paycheck. And so there's nothing wrong with having that reserve fund build up. It's it's sound financial planning, what you do in your homes, what businesses do, and what I think we should do as a city. I'm just asking Jake if it's possible to show this money that we're going to be saving, where is it going to within the budget? Because in theory, what you're saying is if we're saving this money, then that should be money to pay for police officer salaries. But Brant and Jake are telling us that's not the case. That money that to have those police officer salaries or additional expenses, we need more revenues. So I want to know, where are those saved expenses going to?
I agree with that. Thank you.
I think you, Mayor, I think you've kind of hit the nail on the head. I think that's a great ask.
And I'll say also that I was a little bit confused by the statement that was made earlier, that last direction was that we should do the budget without the idea of a truth in taxation, because what I thought in my memory the last statement was let's have ready all of the communication and PR materials that we used last time we did this, and make sure we mimic them. And so, you know, I mean, we won't have the staff spend their time on that until we've decided for sure, but that was my understanding of what the last direction was that we were going to move forward on this, and that we would be mimicking the same communication process that we followed the last time. Because the last time, you know, and the reason I say this now is because it is to the way that the mayor just hit the nail exactly on the head, which was we just need to be absolutely thorough and forthright about the details about what the situation is. Here's the money that we have. It's already allocated. This is what it's going to. Here are the asks from our departments that we have. Here are our needs that we cannot meet based on what we already have in and allocated.
My recollection agrees with Tammy's.
And that is Councilmember Fillmore, that is still the direction. We just, again, with the council members who have a differing idea on how to approach this, that's why clear direction to staff, and that's why we have the request or the city council agenda item for next week to give that clear direction on we're prepared and we're ready to start advertising that. We just need clear direction from council, because it's been, you know, the discussion's been back and forth. So we just need that motion and that vote, and we're ready to roll.
Okay. You made a decision on where we're meeting next week?
At your house, Councilmember Ince.
Okay, I'll tell my wife.
So Jacob and Jennifer and Lisa have the performance audio was just here, I believe, yesterday to work on the feedback issues. We'll be getting together tomorrow or Thursday to do our run through with people essentially logging in remotely from Zoom and trying to do a mock meeting. Hopefully all the issues are addressed.
Hopefully there's plenty of mocking.
There's plenty of
we're
mocking.
good. This new system's quite impressive. All of you will like it. It works well.
I think what Councilman McEwen's saying is, yeah, a double or triple check would be nice.
I think he was saying mocking of other city employees. That's what I got out of
Oh,
that.
okay.
We're
Mocking
elected
of other-
officials. You could all, you know, pantomime your favorite one from the dais to see how it sounds. That's where I was going.
So did that mean at the city hall or on Zoom?
Means you should
either-
let us know, I think.
Either or. So there could be a couple of ways we do this, and we could have 2 council members from home, 3 at City Hall, just to split it up, whatever we want to do in terms of that. I mean, if you feel comfortable sitting near each other like you were before, I don't think that's unfair. I see council members all over actually doing that. We just want to be safe. But if council members want to work from home, that should be their option. And if residents want to participate from home, they could do that as well. So again, it's both. Pick or choose. If you want to come, great. If not, Zoom in. Zoom in either way. You can Zoom in on your car or Zoom in online.
With YouTube, we've effectively had the ability for now 4 years that people could attend the meeting from home. We basically had to be there, although we have on several occasions had someone traveling who participated in the meeting by phone. So, I mean, really, it's just an improvement on where we've been, in my mind.
Yeah, YouTube will allow them to participate from home now, and with a video instead of just a phone call that sometimes or most times the audio is just terrible. So this will be an improvement. You're right.
Good luck on the run throughs. Let us know if we need to bring you dinner if you're staying late.
I'll play Councilmember Meekum. Jacob, who do you want to play when we do our mocking?
How about you just don't tell us, we'll watch the video and we'll vote.
Oh, geez.
Did we have any more tonight?
Nope, that was great discussion. Thank you all.
Motion to adjourn.
So moved.
All in
Second.
favor?
Aye.
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 Opposed? Thank you, everyone. See you.
Hey, thank you.
Thanks, Jake.